I'm Abigail Davis, 29 years old, and last winter I inherited my grandmother Margaret's cabin in the Adirondacks. Grandma and I were always close, which is why she left it specifically to me in her will. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, my escape from city life. Then last month, during Sunday dinner, my mother casually mentioned giving my younger sister Brooke a spare key. She should be able to use it whenever she wants, Mom said. Yesterday, I drove up to find something that made my blood boil. Before I tell you what I found, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story of family boundaries resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My grandmother Margaret wasn't just any grandmother. She was my confidant, my teacher, and my best friend. Every Saturday morning throughout my childhood, I'd visit her while my sister Brooke was at dance practice. Grandma taught me how to bake her famous apple pie, knit scarves that never seemed to end right, and tell stories that made ordinary life seem magical. We'd sit in her sunny kitchen with flour dusting our aprons, and she'd tell me about her adventures as a young woman in the 1950s. The cabin was special to us both. My grandfather Robert built it with his own hands in 1962, a labor of love that took him 3 summers to complete. It sat on 5 acres of wooded land with a small private beach on Lake George. The wraparound porch had the most perfect rocking chairs where Grandma and I would sit for hours watching hummingbirds dart around the feeders. Inside, the stone fireplace dominated the living room, lined with bookshelves filled with classics and mysteries. The kitchen still had the original cast iron stove that somehow made everything taste better. Every summer from ages 8 to 18, I spent 2 weeks at the cabin with Grandma. We'd pick blueberries for pancakes, swim in the cool lake water, and read books by the fire when it rained. Brooke would come for a few days with our parents, but she always complained about the mosquitoes and lack of internet. She preferred shopping malls to forest trails. When Grandma passed away last December, I was devastated. The funeral was beautiful but painful, with snow falling gently on the cemetery like powdered sugar on one of her cakes. A week later, we all gathered in Attorney Richard Wilson's office for the reading of the will. I remember his exact words. To my granddaughter Abigail, who shares my love of simple pleasures and quiet moments, I leave my cabin on Lake George and all its contents, with the hope that she finds the same peace there that I have. The room went silent. I could feel Brooke's eyes burning into me from across the table. My parents looked surprised, then concerned. Nobody had expected Grandma to leave her most valuable possession to just one of us. The cabin was worth at least $300,000, not including the land. She should have split it between both girls, my mother Elizabeth whispered to my father Thomas. It's not fair to Brooke. That comment stung, but it wasn't surprising. My relationship with Brooke has always been complicated. 2 years younger than me, she grew up being the family star. She was the cheerleader, the prom queen, the one with the magnetic personality that drew attention in any room. I was the responsible one, the steady achiever, the one who never caused problems. When Brooke crashed Dad's car at 16, they bought her a new one. When I needed college textbooks, I worked extra shifts at the campus bookstore. Back at my apartment in Albany, I tried to process Grandma's gift. My life hadn't been going as planned. My position as marketing executive for a healthcare startup meant 60-hour work weeks and constant stress. My boyfriend Jason and I had just broken up after 3 years because he accepted a job in Seattle without even discussing it with me. The cabin represented something I desperately needed: escape, healing, peace. For 3 months after inheriting it, I spent weekends cleaning, repairing, and making the cabin mine. I kept Grandma's quilts, her collection of blue willow china, and the photographs covering the walls. I added my own touches too: a new coffee maker, a writing desk by the window overlooking the lake, and faster internet that I could use to work remotely. Then came that Sunday dinner at my parents' house a month ago. Mom made her famous pot roast, Dad opened a bottle of Cabernet, and Brooke arrived 45 minutes late as usual. We were just finishing the main course when Mom casually mentioned, "Oh, Abby, I gave Brooke the spare key to the cabin. She's been stressed at work lately and needs a getaway spot." She should be able to use it whenever she wants. Family property should be for the whole family.
I nearly choked on my wine.
You did what? Without asking me? Don't be dramatic, Dad said, refilling his glass. It's just a key. Your grandmother would have wanted you to share. I would have been happy to discuss a schedule for family visits, I said carefully, but the cabin is legally mine. Grandma was very specific about that. Brooke rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Abby. It's just a weekend here and there. It's not like you live there full time. Don't be so selfish. I tried to be understanding. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being possessive. I took a deep breath and suggested, how about we come up with some ground rules? I'd appreciate a heads up before anyone uses the cabin, and certain areas like Grandma's study should remain untouched. That sounds very controlling, Mom said with a disappointed sigh. We raised you to be more generous than this. The conversation moved on to Dad's golf tournament, but my stomach remained knotted. Later that evening, as I was leaving, Brooke hugged me and whispered, thanks for being cool about the cabin. I might go up next weekend if that's okay. I nodded, still uncomfortable but unwilling to cause more conflict. Over the next few weeks, Brooke texted me several times asking specific questions about the cabin, where the circuit breaker was, if the hot water heater was working, whether the grill on the deck had propane. I answered each one, trying to be helpful while ignoring the growing unease in my stomach. When she asked if the driveway could fit 4 cars, alarm bells started ringing in my head. Planning to have company? I texted back. Just a couple friends. No big deal, she replied with a smiley face emoji. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I decided to surprise myself with an impromptu long weekend at the cabin. I needed the mental health break, and the weather forecast promised perfect fall temperatures. I packed my laptop for some light work, 3 new mystery novels, and ingredients for comfort food. The 3-hour drive from Albany filled me with anticipation as maple and oak trees showed off their red and gold colors along the highway. This was exactly what I needed. The familiar gravel road leading to the cabin always gave me a sense of coming home. As I navigated the final curve through the pine trees, my peaceful mood evaporated. Brooke's red Jeep Cherokee sat in the driveway, alongside 3 other vehicles I didn't recognize, a black BMW convertible, a white pickup truck with oversized tires, and a silver Audi SUV. Loud music thumped from inside the cabin, some generic pop song with too much bass. I parked behind Brooke's Jeep and sat for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't a couple friends. This was a party. In my cabin. Without my permission. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and froze in shock. My grandmother's cozy living room had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The antique coffee table was covered with empty beer bottles and pizza boxes. Someone had moved the leather sofa to face the window, leaving drag marks on the hardwood floor. 2 people I'd never seen before were sprawled on it, holding red plastic cups and scrolling through their phones. Excuse me, I said loudly over the music. Who are you? They looked up, surprised but not concerned. A guy with a man bun said, Oh, are you another friend of Brooke's? She's out back with the others. I didn't answer, just continued my stunned inspection of the cabin. The dining room was worse. Grandma's handmade lace tablecloth was stained with what looked like red wine and pizza sauce. Her antique oak chairs had been rearranged haphazardly, with one missing entirely. I found it on the porch, where someone had used it to prop open the screen door. Cigarette butts littered the porch railing, some having burned small marks into the wood. In the kitchen, dirty dishes filled the sink, and empty liquor bottles lined the counter. The refrigerator door stood open, its contents ransacked. A cast iron skillet that Grandma had meticulously seasoned for decades soaked in soapy water in the sink, already showing signs of rust. Each discovery felt like a physical blow. But the worst was yet to come. As I walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms, I noticed muddy footprints tracking across the hand-woven runner that Grandma had bought on her trip to New Mexico. The door to her bedroom, which I had carefully preserved as a sort of memorial to her, stood ajar. I pushed it open with a trembling hand. What the hell, Brooke? I whispered in horror. Grandma's patchwork quilt, sewn from pieces of her children's baby clothes, lay crumpled on the floor. The antique vanity had been repurposed as a makeshift bar, with bottles and glasses crowding the surface. The framed family photographs that had lined the walls were gone, replaced by a string of party lights haphazardly tacked into the log walls. A splash of laughter from outside drew me to the window. Through the glass, I could see a group of about 8 people on the dock. Some were drinking, others were smoking. Brooke sat in the center, leaning against her boyfriend Tyler, looking completely at ease, as if she owned the place. My place. I stormed outside, nearly tripping over an inflatable pool float someone had abandoned on the path. The group fell silent as I approached, Brooke's eyes widening in recognition. Abby, what are you doing here? Her tone suggested I was the one who didn't belong. What am I doing here? This is my cabin, Brooke. What are all these people doing here? Tyler, whom I'd always found condescending, draped his arm around Brooke protectively. Whoa, chill out. We're just having a little get-together. Did you see what you've done to the inside? Grandma's quilt is on the floor. Her tablecloth is ruined. There are cigarette burns on the porch. My voice kept rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Brooke had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but quickly recovered. Don't be so uptight. We'll clean up before we leave on Sunday. Sunday? It's Thursday. Yeah, we're staying the weekend. Mom and Dad said I could use it whenever I want. She emphasized the last part, mimicking our mother's voice. They had no right to say that. This cabin belongs to me, not them. A tall blonde woman I didn't know leaned over to Brooke and stage whispered, "Is this the control freak sister you told us about?" That was it.
I felt something snap inside me.
Everyone who doesn't belong here needs to leave.
Now.
Tyler stood up, using his 6-foot frame to tower over me. Look, princess, you can't just show up and kick everyone out. Brooke invited us for the weekend, and we've all taken time off work. You're being completely unreasonable. Unreasonable? You've trashed my property, disrespected my grandmother's memory, and you're calling me unreasonable? A small crowd had gathered now, watching the confrontation with the eager expressions of people hoping for drama. I suddenly felt outnumbered and overwhelmed. You know what? I said, fighting back tears. I can't deal with this right now. But this isn't over, Brooke. I turned and walked back to the cabin, ignoring the whispers and snickers behind me. Inside, I grabbed my overnight bag, which I hadn't even unpacked, and headed for the door. The guy with the man bun watched me curiously from the sofa. Family drama, huh, he said with a smirk. I slammed the door behind me, threw my bag into the car, and drove away, hands shaking on the steering wheel. 15 minutes later, I checked into the Lakeside Inn in Lake Placid, a place I couldn't really afford but needed desperately. As soon as I closed the hotel room door, the tears came in earnest. I collapsed onto the bed and sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes burned. The room's generic beige walls and floral bedspread felt like an insult after the careful restoration I'd done at the cabin. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend Lauren, but noticed 3 missed calls from my mother already. Brooke must have contacted her immediately. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, I ran a hot bath in the hotel tub and tried to think clearly through my options. As I soaked, watching steam rise to the ceiling, I realized something important. This pattern had been repeating my entire life. Brooke takes what's mine. My parents enable her. I stepped back to keep the peace. Not this time. This time was different. The cabin wasn't just any possession. It was my inheritance, my connection to Grandma, my sanctuary. And I was done letting my family walk all over me. The hotel room phone jarred me awake at 7:30 the next morning. I fumbled for it, still groggy from a night of fitful sleep and anxious dreams. Hello? Abigail Davis? A crisp voice asked. This is front desk. Your mother is in the lobby asking for your room number. Hotel policy prevents us from giving it out without your permission. My stomach clenched. How did she even know I was here? I'm not sure, ma'am. Should I send her up? I considered saying no, but that would only postpone the inevitable. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. I barely had time to splash water on my face and pull on jeans and a sweater before a sharp knock came at the door. I opened it to find both my parents standing there, looking like they'd been up all night. Dad's silver hair was uncombed, and Mom still wore her gardening sweater. "What were you thinking, storming out like that?" Mom demanded before she even crossed the threshold. "Brooke called us in tears last night." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "I'm sure she did." Dad paced the small room while Mom perched on the edge of the desk chair. Neither seemed interested in hearing my side. "You embarrassed your sister in front of her friends," Dad said. "She was just trying to have a relaxing weekend." "Did she tell you what I found when I got there? Did she mention the cigarette burns on Grandma's porch? Or the stains on her heirloom tablecloth? Or the muddy footprints all over the rugs?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "You're being too sensitive. It's just stuff, Abby. They're young people having fun." "It's my stuff," I insisted. "And they didn't just have fun. They were destructive and disrespectful." Dad sat heavily on the bed. "Look, your grandmother would have wanted the cabin to be enjoyed, not treated like a museum. Brooke's going through a hard time at work. She needed this getaway." "I'm going through a hard time too," I said, my voice rising. "That's why I drove up yesterday. I needed peace and quiet, not a frat party." "Well, if you had called ahead," Mom began. "Called ahead? To my own property. I shouldn't have to make an appointment to use something that belongs to me." Dad's face reddened. "That's exactly the kind of selfish attitude we're talking about. Family shares, Abigail. That's how we raised you." The conversation continued in this vein for 20 painful minutes. Every point I raised was dismissed. Every boundary I tried to establish was rejected as unreasonable. It felt like I was 10 years old again, watching Brooke break my science project the night before it was due with Mom telling me she didn't mean it. "Don't make such a fuss." When they finally left, with pointed remarks about thinking about what's really important and growing up, I felt hollowed out. I lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan making slow circles above me. The familiar guilt began creeping in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just let it go. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "How's the cabin getaway?" "Peaceful." I called her immediately, the words pouring out in a rushed, emotional jumble. Lauren listened without interrupting, then said exactly what I needed to hear. "Abby, this is insane. They're gaslighting you. The cabin is legally yours. You get to decide who uses it and when. Full stop. But they make me feel so selfish for wanting control over my own property," I said. "That's because it's working for them," Lauren replied firmly. "They've been playing you your whole life. Remember when Brooke borrowed your car in college and returned it with an empty tank and a dented fender? Or when she wore your new dress to that wedding and spilled wine all over it? She's never faced consequences, so why would she start now?" The memories came flooding back. So many instances of Brooke taking my things without permission, damaging them, and facing zero repercussions. "You're right," I said slowly. "This is a pattern. Damn straight it is. And it's time to break it. What are you going to do?" I opened my laptop and began researching property rights in New York State. The deed to the cabin was in my name. The will had been clear. There were no legal ambiguities here. Next, I called Attorney Wilson, who had handled Grandma's will. "Ms. Davis, legally speaking, the situation is straightforward," he assured me after hearing my story. "The property is solely yours. You have no obligation to allow family members to use it, with or without your presence. And you certainly have grounds for compensation for any damages they've caused." "I don't want to sue my sister," I said, "but I do want to establish clear boundaries." "Sometimes," he said kindly, "clear legal action is the only language some people understand." While I was still processing this advice, my phone lit up with a barrage of texts from Brooke. "Way to ruin everyone's weekend. Tyler's friend Bradley drove all the way from Boston for this. Mom and Dad think you're being ridiculous. You've always been jealous of me. Grandma would be so disappointed in how selfish you've become." That last one hit like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten and my breathing become shallow. The room seemed to shrink around me. A panic attack was coming, something I hadn't experienced since college finals. I forced myself to focus on my breathing, counting slowly as I inhaled and exhaled. When the worst had passed, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, eyes red and puffy, face pale. Enough, I whispered to my reflection. Enough being the family doormat. I had reached a crucial decision point. Continue being the peacekeeper who sacrificed her own needs for family harmony, or finally stand up for myself and what was rightfully mine. 29 years of conditioning urged me toward the former. But something stronger, something that sounded remarkably like Grandma's voice, pushed me toward the latter. I texted Lauren, "I'm taking back my cabin." Her response was immediate. "Finally. What's the plan?" And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I smiled. By noon, I had checked out of the hotel and was sitting across from Patricia Reynolds, a local attorney specializing in property disputes. Her office overlooked the main street of Lake Placid, with diplomas and fishing trophies competing for wall space. "Based on what you've told me," she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, "you have several options. We could send a formal cease and desist letter, file for a restraining order against your sister specifically, or pursue damages for the items already destroyed." I considered these options carefully. What about changing the locks? Is that legal since I'm the sole owner? Absolutely. As the property owner, you have the right to secure your premises as you see fit. Anyone using a key they once had but are now told not to use would be trespassing. This felt like the right first step. After leaving Patricia's office with a folder of legal documents, I headed to Adirondack Hardware on Main Street. The bell jingled cheerfully as I entered, and an older man with a magnificent white beard looked up from behind the counter. "Help you find something, miss?" "I need new locks for a cabin. All exterior doors, and maybe some window locks too." He nodded sagely. "Security issue?" "You could say that." As he helped me select the appropriate hardware, the man, who introduced himself as Samuel Mitchell, shared that he also did handyman work in the area. He handed me his card. "In case you need help with installation or any repairs. Been fixing up places around these lakes for 30 years. I tucked his card into my wallet, already thinking it might come in handy. With the new locks purchased and stowed in my car, I steeled myself for the return to the cabin. This time, I wouldn't be fleeing in tears. The driveway had even more cars than before. Music still pumped from inside, though it was barely 1 in the afternoon. I counted at least 5 new vehicles. This wasn't just a weekend gathering, it was turning into a full-blown house party. I parked at the end of the driveway and walked toward the cabin, determined to document everything before taking action. Using my phone, I photographed each car with its license plate, then systematically recorded the exterior damage: cigarette burns on the wooden railing, beer cans floating in Grandma's flower beds, a broken window on the garden shed. As I approached the front porch, 2 young women I'd never seen before exited the cabin. They wore bikini tops despite the autumn chill, with drinks in their hands. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you friends of Brooks?" They looked me up and down with identical expressions of vague disdain. "Who's asking?" the taller one said. "I'm Abigail Davis. I own this cabin." They exchanged glances. "Oh," the shorter one said. "You're the sister. Brooks said you might show up again to cause problems." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "And you are?"
I'm Medjison.
"This is Caitlin. We work with Brooke at the real estate office." "Well, Madison and Caitlin, I'd like to know how many people are currently staying at my property without my permission." Madison shrugged. "Like 15 maybe? People have been coming and going." 15 people. In a 3-bedroom cabin. Using Grandma's water, electricity, and septic system that wasn't designed for that many occupants. "Thanks," I said tightly and continued documenting with my phone as I walked around the property. The dock was now crowded with people sunbathing and drinking. The small aluminum fishing boat that had belonged to my grandfather had been untied and was drifting about 20 feet from shore, empty beer cans visible even from a distance. I was photographing this when a voice called out, "Can I help you?" I turned to find an elderly woman watching me from the neighboring property line. She wore gardening gloves and held pruning shears, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Hello," I said, walking over to her. "I'm Abigail Davis." This was my grandmother Margaret's place. Recognition dawned on her face. Margaret's granddaughter.
I'm Eleanor Jenkins.
Your grandmother and I were friends for over 40 years.
I was so sorry to hear of her passing.
We shook hands across the low stone wall separating our properties. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Jenkins. I wish it were under better circumstances." She glanced toward the party on my dock. "Yes, well, it's been quite lively over there lately. Not at all like when Margaret was in residence." "Lately? You mean this has happened before?" Eleanor's expression grew concerned. "Oh my, yes. Different groups every few weekends since early summer. I assumed you were renting it out, though I did think Margaret would have disapproved." My stomach dropped. "Since early summer?" "I've only visited about once a month since I inherited it." "Are you certain?" "Quite certain. I keep track of comings and goings. Force of habit from my days as a school principal." She smiled apologetically. "The worst was over 4th of July weekend. The noise was incredible. Fireworks until 3 in the morning. My dog was terrified." "I had no idea," I whispered. "I never gave permission for any of this." Eleanor patted my hand. "I suspected as much. You have Margaret's eyes, you know. Kind eyes. She wouldn't have raised a granddaughter who'd allow such disrespect to her property." After promising to update Eleanor once I'd sorted things out, I returned to my documentation mission with renewed determination. If this had been going on all summer, the damage was likely far worse than I initially thought. The inside of the cabin confirmed my fears. New stains marked the living room rug. The antique mirror in the hallway had a crack running through it. In the kitchen, the distinctive smell of burnt food suggested someone had misused Grandma's temperamental oven. But the worst discovery came when I entered Grandma's bedroom again. The small wooden jewelry box that had sat on her nightstand was gone. It wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, containing mostly costume pieces, but it included her wedding ring and a cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. I searched frantically through drawers and closets, but it was nowhere to be found. Heartsick, I continued through the cabin, finding more evidence of disrespect and damage at every turn. In the small den, Grandma's collection of family photographs had been removed from the walls, stacked carelessly in a corner. Several frames were cracked, and one precious image of Grandma as a young woman standing beside her new cabin was missing entirely. I was about to confront the partiers outside when a notification popped up on my phone. Lauren had sent a link with the message. "You need to see this right now." The link opened to an Airbnb listing titled "Charming Adirondack Family Cabin with Lake Access." The photos were unmistakably of my cabin, though carefully angled to hide the personal touches. The host was listed as Brooke D. The calendar showed multiple bookings throughout the summer, with rates ranging from $200 to $350 per night. A quick calculation suggested Brooke had made at least $3,400 renting out my property, without permission. I felt physically ill. This wasn't just Brooke using the cabin occasionally. She had turned it into a business venture, profiting from my inheritance while simultaneously allowing it to be damaged and disrespected. I called Lauren, who answered immediately. "Tell me you're seeing this," she said without preamble. "I'm seeing it. I'm standing in the middle of it. There are 15 people here right now, Lauren. 15. And my neighbor says it's been happening all summer. What are you going to do?" I looked around at the remnants of my grandmother's careful curation, at the life she had built in this special place, now treated as disposable by the sister who should have respected both her memory and my ownership. "I'm taking it back," I said, with a calm that surprised me. "Today." After ending the call, I walked to the small bedroom that had once been mine during summer visits. It remained relatively untouched, probably because it was the furthest from the main living areas. I sat on the twin bed with its faded quilt and felt tears welling up again, but this time they came from a different place. Not hurt or shock, but resolute anger. On the bedside table stood a small framed photo of Grandma and me on this very bed, her arm around my 10-year-old shoulders, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. I picked it up, tracing her face with my finger. "I won't let them disrespect what you built," I whispered to her image. "I promise." With renewed determination, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on Samuel Mitchell's business card. "Adirondack Lock and Key," Sam speaking. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Abigail Davis. We met at the hardware store earlier. How soon could you come change my locks? Got my truck right outside. Could be there in 45 minutes if it's urgent." "It's urgent," I confirmed and gave him the address. Next, I called Attorney Reynolds and updated her on the Airbnb discovery. She recommended immediate action and promised to email me formal documents I could print and serve. "One more thing," I added. "Can you help me draft a clear, legally binding notice that this property is private and use without the owner's explicit permission constitutes trespassing?" "Absolutely. I'll include that with the documents. Just need a place to send them." I thought quickly. "Send them to Eleanor Jenkins next door. I can print them there." My final call was to the Lake George Sheriff's Department, explaining the situation and asking what support they could provide if needed. The dispatcher was sympathetic but cautious. "Without a formal eviction notice or restraining order, there's limited action we can take. But we can certainly have a deputy present to keep the peace while you secure your property, especially if you're concerned about confrontation." I accepted this offer, arranged a time, and then steeled myself for the next few hours. The confrontation was coming, and this time, I would be prepared. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I had assembled my support team. Samuel Mitchell's truck was parked in the driveway, loaded with new locks and security hardware. Eleanor had printed Attorney Reynolds' documents and even made a pitcher of iced tea for fortification. A sheriff's deputy named Officer Garcia waited discreetly in his vehicle at the end of the driveway, there to intervene only if necessary. I took a deep breath and walked toward the dock where Brooke, Tyler, and their friends were still partying, oblivious to the impending reckoning. As I approached, Brooke spotted me and rolled her eyes dramatically. "She's back," she announced to the group. Everyone braced for the lecture. I kept my voice level. "Brooke, we need to talk. Privately. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my friends. They already know you're trying to ruin our weekend.
Fine.
Everyone needs to pack their things and leave.
Now."
"I've documented the damage to my property, discovered your unauthorized Airbnb business, and have legal notices ready to serve. A locksmith is changing the locks as we speak, and there's a sheriff's deputy here to ensure a peaceful transition." The group fell silent. Tyler stood up, beer in hand. "You brought cops? Are you insane?" "I brought a witness to make sure everyone leaves without further damaging my property. I also have this." I held up my phone showing the Airbnb listing. "Care to explain how you've been renting out my cabin all summer without permission?" Brooke's face flushed. "It was just sitting empty most of the time. Why shouldn't someone use it?" "Because it's not yours to rent. You've made thousands of dollars from my property while letting people damage family heirlooms and disrespect Grandma's memory." The party guests began to look uncomfortable, gathering their belongings and murmuring about leaving. Brooke noticed and became desperate. "Don't go. She can't just kick everyone out. My parents gave me permission to be here." "Your parents don't own this cabin," I said firmly.
"Ida."
"And I need everyone who doesn't belong here to leave within the hour." Tyler stepped forward aggressively. "Or what? You'll have us arrested? For accepting your sister's invitation? Good luck with that." "Not for accepting an invitation," I clarified, "but possibly for trespassing after being formally notified that you're unwelcome, for damage to private property, and in Brooke's case, for running an illegal rental business using property she doesn't own." The tension was broken by the sound of cars coming up the driveway. My parents had arrived, looking grim and determined. Dad stormed toward us while Mom hurried to Brooke's side. "What is this nonsense?" Dad demanded. "The sheriff's department called us because our daughters are having some kind of standoff." "This isn't a family squabble," I said. "This is about legal property rights and Brooke's systematic abuse of my inheritance." Mom put her arm around Brooke, protectively. "Abigail, you're making a scene. These people came here in good faith." Did they? I pulled out my phone again. Did they know they were staying at an illegal Airbnb? Did you know Brooke's been renting out my cabin all summer and pocketing the money? My parents exchanged confused glances. This, apparently, was news to them. That can't be right, Mom said uncertainly. It is right. I have the listing, the reviews, the calendar of bookings. She's made over $3,000 renting out property that isn't hers to rent. Brooke burst into tears, the kind of dramatic sobs that had always brought my parents running to her defense. I just wanted to share this beautiful place with people. You're so selfish, keeping it all to yourself when you're hardly ever here.
Tyler chimed in.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, your grandmother would probably be happy to see the place being used instead of treated like some shrine. That pushed me over the edge. Don't you dare presume to know what my grandmother would want. This was her home for 60 years. She left it to me because she knew I would respect what she built here. And in less than a year, you've treated it like a party house. My father, always the one to seek quick resolution to family conflict, tried to take control. All right, everyone calm down. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding. How about this? Brooke's friends leave today, and then the four of us, as a family, sit down and work out a fair arrangement for sharing the cabin. There's no misunderstanding, I said. And there will be no sharing arrangement until Brooke takes responsibility for the damage she's caused and returns every cent she made renting out my property. Mom looked shocked. Abigail, we raised you to share with your sister. You raised me to be taken advantage of. Not anymore. Brooke's tears stopped abruptly, replaced by cold anger. You've always been jealous of me. Always. You're loving this power trip, aren't you? This isn't about power or jealousy. It's about respect. Respect for my property rights, respect for Grandma's memory, and respect for me as a person who deserves to have boundaries. Samuel Mitchell chose this moment to approach, tipping his cap politely. Ms. Davis? Locks are all changed. Got the new keys right here for you. Thank you, Sam, I said, accepting the keys. Could you start on the window locks next? You changed the locks? Mom gasped. Without discussing it with the family first, I don't need family discussion or permission to secure my own property. Dad's face darkened with anger. This is not how we handle things in this family, Abigail. Your grandmother would be ashamed of how you're treating your sister. That's where you're wrong, Dad. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she left the cabin to me and not to the family collectively. She valued this place too much to see it treated the way Brooke has treated it. Tyler, sensing the tide turning against them, decided on a new tactic. Look, maybe we got carried away, but threatening legal action against your own sister? That's cold. What's cold is renting out someone else's property without permission. What's cold is allowing people to damage family heirlooms and then playing the victim when called out on it. I handed Brooke the formal notice Attorney Reynolds had prepared. This documents that you no longer have permission to use this property without my explicit written consent. It also demands repayment of all rental income you received, plus damages for items destroyed or missing, including Grandma's jewelry box. Jewelry box? Mom interrupted. What jewelry box? The one that was on Grandma's nightstand. The one with her wedding ring. It's gone, along with several other irreplaceable items. Brooke looked genuinely surprised. I don't know anything about a jewelry box. Whether you took it or one of your paying guests took it, the responsibility is yours. My father, a man unaccustomed to not getting his way, tried one last manipulation. If this is how you treat family, Abigail, your mother, and I may need to rethink our own estate planning. Is that what you want? For a moment, the old fear gripped me. The fear of disappointing, of being excluded, of not being the good daughter. But it passed quickly. This isn't about your money, Dad. This is about respect. If you can't see that, then that's your problem, not mine. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Then, unexpectedly, one of Brooke's friends spoke up. Guys, we should go. This is getting weird, and honestly, if someone was renting out my place without permission, I'd be pissed too. This seemed to break the spell. The party guests began collecting their belongings in earnest. Tyler tried to argue further, but even he could see it was a losing battle. "This isn't over," he muttered as he stalked past me toward his car. Within 30 minutes, all of Brooke's friends had left, leaving just my immediate family and Samuel, who tactfully busied himself with the window locks while we continued our confrontation inside. Brooke sat at the kitchen table, still teary but with an undercurrent of calculation in her expression. "You've humiliated me in front of my friends. I hope you're happy." "I'm not happy at all," I said truthfully. "I'm heartbroken that it came to this. But I'm not backing down." Mom tried once more. "Surely we can come to some compromise. The cabin is so big for just one person. Maybe Brooke could have scheduled weekends or—" "Mom," I interrupted firmly. "There will be no compromise until Brooke acknowledges what she did wrong and makes amends. She rented out my property for profit. She allowed it to be damaged. Items are missing. These aren't small transgressions." My father, unusually quiet now, finally spoke. "Brooke, did you really list the cabin on Airbnb?" Cornered, Brooke admitted it. "Just a few weekends when I knew Abby wouldn't be here. It's not like I'm made of money, Dad. My commission checks have been terrible lately." "That doesn't make it okay to steal from your sister," he said, surprising me with this small concession. "I wasn't stealing. I was just borrowing the cabin." "You can't borrow something and charge other people money for using it," I pointed out. "That's literally theft." The conversation continued in circles for another hour, with Brooke alternating between tearful apologies and defensive accusations, my parents trying to broker peace without holding Brooke truly accountable, and me standing firm on my boundaries. By the end, we reached an uneasy resolution. Brooke would remove the Airbnb listing immediately, pay back the rental income, and replace or compensate for damaged items. My parents agreed, reluctantly, that the cabin was legally mine to control. As they prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "I hope you know what you're doing, Abigail. Family relationships are more important than property." "I do know what I'm doing, Mom. I'm finally standing up for myself. And you're right about one thing. Family relationships are important. That's why they should be based on mutual respect, not one person constantly giving in to keep the peace." After they drove away, with promises of talking more later and veiled warnings about consequences, I stood on the porch watching the dust settle on the driveway. Samuel finished installing the last window lock and joined me. "Family's complicated," he offered sympathetically. "That it is," I agreed. "Lock systems all set. New keys are coded and can't be duplicated without your written permission. I also installed those motion sensor lights you wanted and set up the doorbell camera. Anyone comes around, you'll know about it." I handed him a check, adding a generous tip. "Thank you, Sam. Not just for the locks, but for being here during all that." He tipped his cap again. "Sometimes standing your ground is the hardest thing to do. But from what I saw today, your grandmother would be mighty proud." As Samuel's truck disappeared down the driveway, I turned back to face the cabin. It was a mess. It would take days to clean and repair everything. Some things, like Grandma's jewelry box, might never be recovered. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something close to peace. The cabin was mine again, and I was finally standing up for myself, even if it cost me the easy approval of my family. The morning after the confrontation dawned clear and crisp, with mist rising off the lake in ethereal wisps. I stood on the dock with a cup of coffee, watching a pair of loons glide across the water. The previous day's drama felt both immediate and somehow distant, like the final scene of a play I'd been unwillingly cast in. I had decided to stay at the cabin for 2 weeks. My boss had been surprisingly understanding when I explained I needed time to deal with serious property damage and family issues, granting me remote work privileges and 10 days of accumulated vacation time. Now I had the space and solitude to begin the process of reclaiming what was mine. The first 3 days were dedicated to cleaning. I worked methodically from room to room, cataloging damage, discarding broken items beyond repair, and carefully restoring what could be saved. Grandma's tablecloth soaked in a special solution Eleanor had provided, pulling most of the wine stains out of the delicate lace. The hardwood floors were scrubbed and polished to remove scuff marks and beer stains. The rust-damaged cast iron skillet required hours of patient reseasoning. On the fourth day, Samuel Mitchell returned with supplies to repair the cigarette burns on the porch railing and fix the broken window in the garden shed. As we worked together, he shared stories of Lake George from decades past, including several fond memories of my grandmother. Margaret was quite something, he said, carefully sanding the damaged wood. Fiercely independent. Reminded me a bit of you, actually. I smiled at the comparison. I wish I had half her backbone. She never seemed to care what anyone thought of her. That came with time, Sam assured me. She wasn't always that way. Life has a way of teaching you what matters and what doesn't. Our working relationship evolved into a friendship as the repairs continued. Sam knew every inch of the lake, every hiking trail, every seasonal change. His quiet competence was comforting, and I found myself looking forward to his daily arrivals. Eleanor Jenkins became another regular visitor, bringing homemade muffins and practical advice in equal measure. She helped me reorganize the kitchen, explaining the logic behind Grandma's particular arrangement of dishes and cookware. She believed everything had a proper place, Eleanor explained. Said it brought order to a chaotic world. I could use some of that order right about now, I admitted. My daily calls with Lauren became a lifeline to the outside world. She cheered every small victory, from successfully rehanging the family photographs to standing firm against my mother's increasingly guilt-laden text messages. Have you heard from Brooke? She asked during our call at the end of the first week. Just through my parents. Apparently, she's too upset to speak to me directly. Dad says she's working on getting the money together to repay me for the Airbnb profits. And you believe that? I sighed. Not really. But I'm giving her the chance to do the right thing before I take more formal action. The cabin slowly transformed back into the sanctuary I remembered, though with subtle changes that made it more mine than Grandma's. I moved the writing desk to capture the morning light better. I added bookshelves in the guest bedroom. I planted new wildflowers along the path to the dock. During the second week, while organizing the crowded bookshelves in the living room, I discovered something unexpected. Behind a row of Reader's Digest condensed books that nobody ever read was a collection of leather-bound journals. My grandmother's diaries, dating back to 1953, the year she married my grandfather. That evening, wrapped in one of her quilts on the porch swing, I began reading them chronologically. Her elegant handwriting filled page after page with observations about nature, recipes she was perfecting, and reflections on family life. In the entry dated June 17, 1968, I found something that made me catch my breath. Robert's sister Violet visited today with her children. While the little ones played by the lake, Vi confided that she feels Robert and I favor her eldest niece over the others. It struck me as unfair, as we try to love all the children equally. But then I wondered, do we unconsciously show preference? Do I give more attention to little Susan because she reminds me of myself at that age? Vi left angry when I suggested she might be seeing favoritism where none exists. Family is the most complicated love of all. I read the entry twice, struck by the parallels to my own situation. Grandma had faced similar family conflicts, though from the other side of the equation. I continued reading, finding more entries that revealed the complexities of her family relationships, including difficult periods of estrangement from her own sister over perceived slights and misunderstandings. In an entry from 1991, she wrote, "Today I stood my ground with Caroline, her sister, about the holiday plans. For years I've adjusted my schedule to accommodate her preferences, always bending to keep the peace. No more. It wasn't easy, and there were tears on both sides, but afterward I felt a curious lightness. Perhaps boundaries aren't walls that separate us from loved ones, but necessary lines that allow us to love them without losing ourselves." I closed the journal, feeling a profound connection to the grandmother I'd loved but perhaps never fully known. She had faced the same struggles I was facing now, had felt the same guilt and uncertainty, and had ultimately chosen self-respect over appeasement. Midway through the second week, I received a formal letter from my parents. The envelope contained a check from Brooke for $3,200, less than she'd actually earned from the rentals, but close enough, and a typed note from my father. Abigail, we hope this resolves the financial aspect of the unfortunate situation at the cabin. Brooke has expressed sincere regret for her actions and asks for your understanding during this difficult time in her life. Your mother and I suggest the following arrangement going forward. 1. The cabin remains in your name as per your grandmother's wishes. 2. Brooke may use the cabin for up to 2 weekends per month, with at least 1 week's notice. 3. Family gatherings take precedence over individual plans. 4. Any changes to the cabin's historic character must be approved by the family collectively. We trust this reasonable compromise will restore harmony to our family. Love, Dad. I read the letter twice, noting what it didn't contain. An apology from Brooke herself, any acknowledgement of the emotional damage done, or recognition of my right to set my own boundaries for my property. With Samuel's help, I drafted a response outlining my own terms.
1.
The cabin remains in my name with full decision-making authority. 2. Family members may request to use the cabin with at least 2 weeks' notice, subject to my approval. 3. All visitors must follow cabin rules regarding care of property and heirlooms. 4. Any violation of these terms will result in loss of visiting privileges. I concluded with, I value our family relationship and want the cabin to be a place of happy memories for all of us. But that can only happen with mutual respect for boundaries and property. As I sealed the envelope, I felt not anger but resolve. This wasn't about punishing Brooke or my parents. It was about establishing a new, healthier dynamic. During my final days at the cabin, I discovered another of Grandma's special places. Behind the garden shed, almost hidden by overgrown rhododendrons, was a small garden enclosed by a low stone wall. Inside, perennial flowers had gone wild in her absence. Black-eyed Susans, coneflowers, and lady's mantle creating a riot of color even in early fall. I spent my last afternoon clearing weeds and pruning back the overgrowth, imagining Grandma doing the same task for decades. As I worked, I noticed a stone bench nearly hidden by tall grasses. Once cleared, I found an inscription carved into its surface. In solitude we find ourselves, in sharing we find our humanity. That evening, as I sat on that bench watching the sunset turn the lake to fire, my phone buzzed with a text. From Brooke, the first direct communication since the confrontation. I found the jewelry box. It was in Tyler's car. He says someone must have packed it by mistake. I can mail it or bring it by.
I'm sorry, Abby.
For everything. The message wasn't elaborate or particularly eloquent, but it felt like the first genuine communication we'd had in years. I replied simply, "Thank you for finding it. I appreciate the apology. Let's talk when I'm back in town." It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a start. A seed of potential change, planted in newly cleared ground. 6 months passed, bringing winter's deep freeze and eventual thaw to the Adirondacks. The cabin, buttoned up against the snow and cold, waited patiently for spring's return. And so did I, giving myself and my family the space to process what had happened and what might come next. The transformation of the cabin continued during weekend visits throughout the winter. Samuel, who turned out to be as skilled with interior work as exterior, helped me refinish the original hardwood floors and update the ancient heating system. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into something more personal, our conversations extending long after the work was done for the day. Eleanor became a regular correspondence friend, sending weekly letters filled with local gossip and sage advice. She kept an eye on the cabin during the weeks I couldn't be there, reporting on everything from heavy snowfall on the roof to deer tracks on the frozen lake. My relationship with my family entered a new phase as well. The initial anger and hurt feelings slowly gave way to cautious communication. My parents, though still uncomfortable with my assertiveness, began to show a grudging respect for the boundaries I'd established. Our Sunday dinners resumed, with noticeably less manipulation and more genuine conversation. Brooke proved the biggest surprise. The return of Grandma's jewelry box seemed to mark a turning point for her. Without the enabling presence of our parents, She and I met for coffee several times, having the kind of honest conversations we'd avoided for years. I was jealous, she admitted during one such meeting. You and Grandma had this special bond that I never had with anyone. When she left you the cabin, it felt like one final confirmation that she loved you more. She didn't love me more, I said. She just recognized that I would value the cabin the way she did. You've always been more interested in new experiences, new places. The cabin represented stability and tradition. Maybe, Brooke conceded, but I still shouldn't have done what I did. Tyler kept saying it was no big deal, that family property is basically communal property. I knew better, but it was easier to go along with it. And the Airbnb? I asked. She had the grace to look genuinely ashamed. That was all me. I was having money problems after the commission structure changed at work. It seemed like an easy solution to a temporary problem. I never thought about how it would affect you or the cabin. Over time, Brooke began to earn back my trust through actions rather than promises. She helped with several restoration projects at the cabin, carefully following my lead. She stopped bringing Tyler around and eventually mentioned they had broken up. He didn't understand why I was still obsessing about the cabin situation, she explained. Said I should just demand my share and be done with it. That's when I realized he'd never respected my family or our history. By early spring, I felt ready to host a small gathering at the newly restored cabin. Lauren drove up from New York City for the weekend. Eleanor brought her famous blueberry cobbler. Samuel arrived early to help prepare the dock for the season. And yes, my parents and Brooke came too, each bringing a dish and, more importantly, an open mind. Before dinner, I presented everyone with a formal document my lawyer had prepared, Cabin Use Agreement. It outlined clear terms for family visits, maintenance responsibilities, and respect for the property's historical elements. Everyone signed it without argument, a small miracle that didn't go unnoticed. As we ate dinner on the porch, watching the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. Mom shared stories of visiting the cabin as a newlywed, describing how intimidated she'd been by Grandma's exacting standards. Dad recalled fishing trips with Grandpa, learning to clean bass and perch right on the dock below us. I never knew Grandma was scared of swimming, Brooke said after one such story. She always seemed fearless to me. Oh, Margaret had her fears, Eleanor chimed in. She just didn't let them stop her from living exactly as she pleased. After dinner, while the others chatted around the fire pit Samuel had built near the shore, I slipped inside to fetch more coffee. In the kitchen, I noticed the family Bible sitting on the counter, though I couldn't remember putting it there. Something compelled me to open it. Between the pages of Psalms, I found an envelope addressed simply, "For Abigail, when she needs it most." Inside was a letter written in Grandma's unmistakable hand, dated just 2 months before she passed away. "My dearest Abby," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've inherited the cabin as I intended. I hope it brings you the same joy and peace it brought me over the years. I'm leaving the cabin specifically to you because I see in you the strength to preserve what matters while having the wisdom to know when change is necessary. Family will question this decision. They may even try to undermine it. Stand firm. In my 87 years, I've learned that family love is both the most precious gift and the most complicated burden. We endure hurts from family we would never accept from strangers, all in the name of keeping peace. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is establish firm boundaries. The cabin is more than logs and nails. It's a testament to choosing what matters: simplicity, nature, connection to something lasting. In your hands, I know it will continue to be a place of gathering, of memory-making, and perhaps most importantly, of finding yourself away from the noise of modern life. Remember always, the most important inheritance I can leave you isn't this cabin, but the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. With all my love, Grandma Margaret. I read the letter twice, tears blurring the words the second time through. Somehow, she had known exactly what challenges I would face. She had prepared me, not just with her legal will, but with her emotional wisdom. When I rejoined the group outside, the conversation had turned to summer plans. Brooke was describing a kayaking trip she wanted to organize. Of course, only if that works for you, Abby, she added, catching my eye. It's your cabin. Our family's cabin, I corrected gently. Under my management. Samuel caught my hand as I sat beside him. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just the opposite, I said. I found confirmation I'm on the right path. As the fire crackled and sparks rose to meet the emerging stars, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey hadn't been easy. Relationships had been strained, painful truths exposed, old patterns broken. But from that difficult process had emerged something authentic and strong. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I took Grandma's letter to the dock. The lake stretched black and silver in the moonlight, the same view she had contemplated for 60 years. I could almost feel her presence beside me, nodding approval at the boundaries I'd established and the peace I'd found in doing so. The most important inheritance wasn't the cabin, though I cherished it. It was the courage to stand up for myself, to define my own worth rather than accepting others' limitations. In protecting the physical legacy she'd left me, I discovered the greater legacy of self-respect that had always been within me, waiting to be claimed. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family for something that was rightfully yours? Or have you struggled with setting boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish clear boundaries. I wish you strength and clarity in your own family relationships.